Good morning again, everybody. Welcome again to the 2025 18th Annual Nebraska Wind and Solar Conference. My name is Drake Becksted. I'm the Vice President of Sales and Marketing for ISI Solar and your moderator for this opening panel session. I'm honored yet again to act as a moderator. I've been doing this for a couple years now and always appreciate the opportunity to assist here at the conference. Today's session is titled, as John noted, The Market Changes and Investor Strategies. We're going to cover the project development and construction and energy demand needs post HR 1 or One Big Beautiful Bill that occurred this July. Our participants in order of presentation are Carol Waszak, Manager, Renewable Energy Resource for Omaha Public Power District, Eric Johnson, President, Sandhills Energy, and Chris Cook, Director of Operational Efficiency for ISI Solar. Carol, please take it away.
All right, good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. So we're going to explore how the renewable energy landscape is evolving. I'm going to be focusing on it from the utility perspective, and as Drake said, we'll look at it from other perspectives as well. But first, I want to provide a little bit of background on Omaha Public Power District. OPPD is a publicly owned utility that's governed by an elected board. We're headquartered in Omaha, Nebraska, and serve a population of almost 900,000 customers in 13 counties. We are the 12th largest public power utility in the U.S. per number of customers. OPPD's mission is to provide affordable, reliable, environmentally sensitive energy services to our customers. A quick snapshot of our generation portfolio. We have over 4,500 megawatts of generation capability that come from multiple types of resources, including wind, solar, hydro, natural gas, oil, and coal. Over the next 5 years, we plan to add 900 megawatts of dual fuel combustion turbines and 420 megawatts of solar paired with 170 megawatt of battery storage. So next, moving into, what big question is what is the impact of the One Big Beautiful Bill Act on renewable projects? This may introduce several challenges for renewable energy development. One of the most immediate impacts will be increased costs of purchase power agreements for projects that can't be completed before the tax credit deadline. In the short term, this has triggered a surge in projects that are racing to qualify for the incentives. We're also seeing projects that are dropping out of the interconnection queue or maybe dropping away. That could be due to various factors, high interconnection costs, long interconnection timelines, permitting challenges at the county level, lack of offtake. But from the utility perspective, we have to evaluate all the risk of each project carefully, the price involved, whereas the developers are often waiting on offtake commitment to move forward. So this is leaving, this dynamic of fewer viable projects, but, with a lot more thoughtful approach to which projects to move forward. Obviously, there's a lot of uncertainty in this, but, there are projects dropping from the queue, which does provide queue relief and clearing out speculative projects. We also will see probably a shift in financing structures. I think you'll probably talk about that a little bit more. But from the OPPD perspective, that may be the opportunity for the utilities to self-develop and own and operate directly. So overall, the transition is hard to predict how things will shake out, but policy cycles are cyclical. So the renewable industry has seen tax credits go away and come back multiple times, so it's hard to say what will actually happen. So while we expect to see a surge now, followed by a slowdown in projects, the industry has proven resilient and adaptable and will adjust to these changes going forward. So that brings us to, what are the benefits of renewables and having renewable energy? So there are many cost benefits of using renewables. It doesn't cost anything to use the sun or wind, so no fuel costs. Obviously, it only comes when it's available, but it is free. But using renewables helps us stabilize energy prices. We're leading to less exposure to fuel price volatility. There's less operating and maintenance costs, and it's lower capital cost to build renewable generation. There are many economic benefits from renewable projects, creating jobs in manufacturing, construction, operating and maintenance, supporting the local economies. There's huge benefits during the construction of the projects to local economies with all the construction going on, lots of things going in the county. The tax revenues are a huge benefit for these areas. A lot of these projects are located in rural areas. So in addition, building these projects help strengthen the rural electric infrastructure. A diverse energy portfolio is extremely important for grid reliability. Renewables reduce our dependency on imported fuels. They can be deployed in multiple locations, so geographically dispersed generation sources increase the resiliency of the grid. Pairing renewables with battery storage will allow for energy to be stored and dispatched at times of peak demand, improving reliability. And of course, the environmental benefits are significant. You have zero emissions during operation, reduced air and water pollution, and then you can incorporate agrivoltaics. It's great collaboration between agriculture and energy generation. So using pollinator habitats, native grass helps improve the ecosystem, and then exploring ways to incorporate grazing and crop integration under solar arrays. So in conclusion, OPD is committed to a balanced approach, and our mission is to provide affordable, reliable, and environmentally sensitive energy services to our customer. So in order to do that, a diverse generation portfolio is extremely important. There are many factors that go into each type of generation we rely on, and many pros and cons for all type. OPD is getting ready to kick off our integrated system planning process this year that will help us identify the right portfolio mix for OPD's customers by delivering on our mission. It's a very important and complex process. So we do appreciate collaboration into this process. There is a sign up out there on opdcommunityconnect.com to let us know you want to be contacted. So with all that said, I do believe renewables will still play an important role in the post One Big Beautiful Bill environment.
I guess I'd just like to welcome everybody first off, and big thanks to John and the planning committee. I was unable to raise my hand for attendance of every single one of these, but John's been doing this a long time. I've been to most of them, so it's a great conference. Welcome, everybody. As Carol introduced me, Eric Johnson, president of Sandhills Energy, founded Sandhills in 2012 in the Sandhills of Nebraska, so native Nebraska resident. We are historically a greenfield developer, have transitioned to an IPP, have over 75 megawatts operating or in construction across the Midwest, have roughly 800 megawatts of projects that will come online in Nebraska over the next 3 years. Our geographic footprint has grown over the years across the Midwest, but our primary focus is largely in Nebraska at this point. In regards to the state of the renewable industry at this point, not just in Nebraska but across the United States, I think one of the things I wanted to talk about was where things stand today, or even prior to the One Big Beautiful Bill, and the fundamental economics of renewables and the fundamentals of the industry that are, from my perspective, very strong. As you can see on the chart here, we'll talk about levelized cost of energy across differing sources of generation, and with tax credits, without tax credits, renewables, wind and solar stack up very well against all forms of generation. And to put that in perspective of adoption, in 2023, over 21% of energy in the United States came from renewables alone. And probably the most telling stat for me in terms of the state of the industry is 95% of all transmission queues across the country are renewables. One thing I would point out on the levelized cost of energy, and this relates largely to utilities, but that's just the energy component, the cost of energy. There's also capacity and reliability components. So, that's a third of the equation of the tough job utilities have to do to focus on cost, capacity, and reliability. But it shows a strong resilience for renewables as they stack up against other sources of generation as we move forward. In regards to the One Big Beautiful Bill, if you guys haven't heard, we've had some tax law changes over the last 6 months that have impacted renewables fairly significantly. And so not going to get into all the details, but just as some high notes, the law that was passed July 4th rolled back effectively the bulk of the tax credits for the renewable industry that were enacted through the Inflation Reduction Act several years ago. Effectively, what it says is it gives us a 1-year runway to qualify or safe harbor for ITC or PTC through July 4th, 2026, or your project has to be complete by the end of 2027. After that, tax credits go away for wind and solar. Additionally, there was Treasury guidance where what used to qualify for safe harboring a project has now been changed. So you have to have meaningful on-site physical work completed or meaningful off-site physical work through specific equipment that is specific to the project itself. So just acquiring modules that can be used on any given project no longer will safe harbor a project. So it has gotten much more stringent in order to qualify for a safe harboring a project. And the 10-year runway that the Inflation Reduction Act gave the industry has effectively been reduced to 12 months and now 7 or 8 months at this point. One other factor is the foreign entity of concern that was part of the One Big Beautiful Bill, where there is safe harboring by the end of the year if you have begun construction either on-site or off-site. And you know, I don't think this is as big of a concern for developers at this point. However, China is very good at building things and doing it cheap, and so it has put additional pressures, I would say, more broadly in the industry. But one thing that is not on here is the tariff impacts to the industry and supply chain that, quite honestly, are probably having more of an impact for the renewables industry than in the short term than the tax law changes at this point. So what does this mean for the future of renewables moving forward post OBBBA? And you know, again, I would say the primary drivers here are demand of renewables or electricity in general, and the availability of new projects coming online, which in combination point to a strong future for renewables, in my opinion. As Carol pointed out, it's hectic right now in the industry, given the 12-month extension or 12-month runway on ITCs. You know, every developer out there is trying to get steel on the ground and advance their projects as quickly as possible to ensure the tax credits are in place. And beyond that, we will likely see electricity prices increase. And so there's going to be a rush over the next, call it 3 years, to get projects in the ground and complete. And I guess from my crystal ball standpoint, beyond that point, the industry will stabilize. There will be changing capital markets without tax credits, more traditional project finance structures versus complicated tax equity transactions in terms of how to finance renewables. But long term, the electricity growth in the United States, as this chart points out, over the next 9 years, the United States has to add or is expected to add over 125 gigawatts of new electricity. And this has to come from somewhere. Gas turbine lead times at this point, Carol would probably have a better idea than I do, but you know, anywhere from 7 to 9 years for lead times on gas turbines, if you don't have them ordered already. You know, I don't think we're building any new coal plants at this point. Nuclear is advancing at a rapid rate, but you know, in the next 9 years, probably not going to fill this whole gap. So I think, you know, the fundamentals of the demand of new electricity and the availability of renewables is really what's going to stabilize the industry long-term and remain strong. And with that, I will turn it over to Chris and welcome your questions.
Thank you, Eric, and good morning. You guys have heard from Nebraska Public Power and OPPD, a Nebraska developer, and now we're going to give our perspective from ISI Solar as a Nebraska-based EPC. EPC stands for Engineering, Procurement, Construction. So basically, we're a full design build contractor. So we're the ones kind of at the bottom of the food chain here who actually have to put the steel in the ground, as Eric says. And so obviously this picture here is not Nebraska. That is one of the sites that we have built out in Colorado, but we are, as I said, based here in Nebraska out of Central City, just within an hour and a half of here. We've been involved with solar from the beginning here in the state, putting in some of the very first projects, and at several occasions building the largest utility scale project at the time within Nebraska, which Carol has now trumped with her 80-something megawatt at Utah. So, and Eric, as he's mentioned, has several very large projects in the hundreds of megawatt that are hopefully coming online soon. So Nebraska is growing rapidly, and we've seen it from the beginning, and are happy to be here as the premier sponsor for the conference. We do have a nationwide reach. We built projects as far away as Maine, but predominantly we like to stay here in the heartland and operate in the Midwest, the Great Plains, and the Rocky Mountains. So as we together collectively face these collective headwinds, perhaps somewhat paradoxically as an EPC, and as Eric alluded to, we're busier than ever right now. So we're rapidly booking up with projects for the next couple of years, and trying to grow quickly to meet this increased capacity. We have clients pulling jobs forward as quickly as they can. We have past clients, new clients coming out of the woodwork, bringing portfolios that they want us to look at. And so overall, it's somewhat chaotic, but within the midst of this, we're seeking to be strategic and look not just to the short-term chaos, but also to kind of long-term, what does that look like for us, and how are we going to navigate this growth? Because we do see within our space great opportunity for growth. So one of the things as we look at these federal tax credits, and also a lot of the grants are being taken away, so as federal money as a whole evaporates, one of the things that stands out to us in our analysis is the increased importance of the states, not so much in filling the void with bringing credits and financing, but really continuing to drive the demand. One key example of this is a meeting we had in New York a couple months ago, literally within weeks of the passing of the bill, and they were not fazed in the least at the prospect of losing tax credits. I mean, that they're used to high cost of construction and projects out there, and additional costs just didn't faze them. They are full steam ahead, looking to put 4 gigawatts worth of renewable energy onto the grid within the coming years. And this is a common theme even closer to home. Some of our regular stomping grounds, states like Illinois, Colorado, Wisconsin, Minnesota, where we operate, again, are some of them doubling down on their own mandates and policies. And you can see here from this map that Nebraska as a whole is surrounded by states that have mandates and have had them for a while. Not that Nebraska needs to follow in that, because we all know Nebraska is unique with our public power and the cheapest rates in the country, and so much else that. So the open question is what can we do that's unique to Nebraska? We're going to delve into that question, amongst other things, a little bit deeper this afternoon in a breakout session that we have, but just leave it for now as an open question with what we're seeing and the states really taking the lead in pushing forward development and also driving the demand that is keeping solar and wind as a necessity. What can we do here in Nebraska that's unique to us? So from where we sit, a summary of our own market analysis aligns perfectly with what we've heard so far from Carol and Eric. basically post-tax credit, post-grants, post-federal funding, we still need power. That's not going away. Load growth is not going away. Electric rates are going to increase. I moved here from Hawaii, the most expensive electricity in the country, to the cheapest, so I know what it's like to have extremely expensive electricity. Hopefully with public power, we're not going to go anywhere close to that, but rates are going up, and that's only going to help solar development from our perspective, absorb some of the shock of the loss of the tax credits in the short term. Again, as Eric mentioned, regardless of tax credits, there's just numerous studies and reports coming out that emphasize that the levelized cost of energy from solar more than competes with every other sort of new generation. And even though, in addition to the costs that come with the loss of the credits, the inflationary costs and the tariffs that are coming in, and how that's going to increase the cost of getting solar projects out there, everything else is getting hit with the same. You look at the price of gas turbines, and they've close to tripled in the last few years. And good luck getting one of those within 5 years from now, whereas in our experience, building and putting distributed generation utility scale plants into the ground, nothing competes with the speed with which those can get built. So we see ourselves in a strong position in the industry, and feel like we can ride this storm out. So just for the grand finale here, I mean, when you're given lemons, what can we, despite everything that's going on, what can we look at here and see as potential positives? And one of the first obvious things is government money always comes with strings attached. We've been involved in grants of every single level, and also with the ITC credits, again, being at the bottom of the food chain, a lot of the compliance issues just trickle down to us, and so the labor requirements, the prevailing wage, and all the documentation goes with that, the apprentice programs, everything that goes with that, those are our costs. And real burdens, and so things in some ways get simpler when you get the government out of the way. We all know that. One thing I want to read here a little blurb from a report. This is a Heliovolta report that just came out within the last couple months. It's a third-party independent assessment of over 1,000 predominantly utility-scale solar projects, and their findings were that 85% of projects analyzed for the report contained major issues that require urgent corrective action, while 7% of projects had critical issues that triggered immediate de-energization and same-day remediation. Their summary was, frankly, our findings are profoundly disappointing. As solar advocates, our team is pained to report that most projects we inspect will underperform or even fail if our findings go unaddressed. We're publishing our analysis to drive the industry to higher quality standards. The best EPCs in our data set prove we can do better. I would say, in our experience as an EPC, we've seen this as an unintended consequence, unfortunately, of the frothiness of the credits over the years and the continued renewal, is that it's turned the focus away from, I mean, what Eric mentioned as these, in due course, becoming just more like traditional assets in finance normally is, rather than being viewed as 30 to 40-year generation assets, these large solar projects have been looked at predominantly as tax instruments, and therefore a focus on quality and value engineering and truly building something that's going to last has been played second fiddle, and we're dealing with the consequences of that right now. We see it in our space, in projects that we get called out to in our operations and maintenance division, things that have not been built too long ago that were very poorly constructed and need a lot of work. We do see it in even the contracts that come before us. Developers are beginning to realize we really need to focus on this, and we hear stories about other EPCs that they've had to work with, and the challenges that they've had, and we've seen it in the field ourselves, even getting calls from competitors asking us if we would come help clean up some messes. So this is not necessarily a bad thing. If I know Carol talked about the queue getting shaken out. The queues are log jammed with speculative projects, and if we can clean that up and streamline the process to get truly viable projects through quickly. Same in the EPC space. If we can weed out some bad actors, and tough times do shake things out, and it's not always a bad thing. On the backside of it, you can come out stronger. And so we've had almost a gold rush in the last 5 years of companies who've tried to get on, especially the utility scale solar, large companies who've created solar divisions out of scratch, or smaller commercial and industrial construction companies who've tried to step up into utility space, which they find out it's a much harder barrier of entry than they ever could have imagined. They struggle and very often fail. And so there will be a shakeout. And so for our perspective, we see that we could come out stronger as a company that is always focused on quality and value engineering. We're not threatened in the least by a turning of the screws and a focus on quality. We welcome that. I'll close with just one last summary from recent Wood Mackenzie report that they warn that the policies put here in the United States at risk of losing 44 gigawatts of solar development by 2030, an 18% decline. When compared to pre-HR1 forecasts, the United States is at risk of losing a total of 55 gigawatts of solar deployment by 2030, a 21% decline. And that was the headline of the article, losing 55 gigawatts. But if you do the simple math, that still means north of 200 gigawatts that they're projecting as in the worst case scenario getting built between now and 2030. That's a lot of solar. And so there's still a big pie to get a piece out of, and our strategic analysis is we plan to grow and come out stronger on the back end of this, and hopefully see an industry that's stronger and putting out better quality projects that will last the nominal 25, even 30 to 40 years that we know they can. So thank you very much.
Thank you all for your presentations there. So before we get into Q&A session, I have a few moderator questions, and I think we'll tag right along with Chris's question of what can Nebraska do. So I'll give the opportunity for the three of you, for each of your seats as a public power developer and an EPC, to answer these questions. First off, so given the challenges and demands we are continually facing in generation and transmission, are there any objective policies that states or local jurisdictions here in Nebraska can consider enacting to assist utilities and asset developers to meet the needs of this energy market?
So I think, one of the biggest challenges is, local zoning, to be able to go in there. There's different things, and some counties don't have the zoning. So I think if the counties are able to get their zoning in place, that it will give the structure for what the projects have to design to, so then it's a lot easier up front. That will make it a smoother process to go through the local permitting. That will help projects to be able to move forward.
What Carol said. Yeah, just to piggyback on that, from a developer perspective, I think, the biggest challenge the two biggest challenges we face are interconnection capacity and the speed of getting an interconnection position, which isn't, I guess, necessarily a Nebraska issue. That's more of a nationwide issue. So I think emphasizing investment in transmission infrastructure, even if that can be done at a local level, but then primarily the permitting risk and local zoning and general opposition to renewables that pops up in rural areas, and whatever we can do to educate or address that's probably the biggest bottleneck for advancing renewables.
Okay, so I guess at the end I have to make up something different than that, but I agree. I mean, even just a statewide policy that creates some uniformity, that gives a grid for local districts that maybe would be coming at this with a blank slate, tabula rasa, just not having any idea what to do with proposals. And so something as simple as setting standards for setbacks would make a big difference. I think you can't understate the importance of just simple streamlining policy. I could speak from as an analogous perspective in Hawaii, where I was in the rooftop industry. Sometimes a project, even just for a simple residence, it would be 18 months from sale to getting it online, and there was just you lose a lot of projects in that timeline, and it's just the interconnection queue, the permitting, everything that just adds soft costs to the whole process. And so a lot of what was tax credit money was basically going to sales commissions in order to keep those guys online while they were trying to wait for an 18-month paycheck down the line. So you just had to pay them more and more to entice them. So an example would be, in the U.S. industry, you have to pay north of $3 a watt in order to get solar on a roof, whereas in Australia, who established nationwide permitting guidelines and processes and procedures where you can get, and we have some places in the U.S. like this. We had places in California for the company I worked with where you could sell a project and install it within a couple days, and that gives certainty to the process. It gives understanding of soft costs. But in Australia, where they have these streamlined processes, they're putting rooftop solar on for less than $1 a watt. So you can cut costs drastically with any level of certainty and streamlining of a process where you bring timelines down. And so that's what I would say would be a great thing to be able to focus on.
Excellent. Now, one of the things that is a strong push in the energy market, per se, is the constant talk currently about data centers, as well as the renewed investment in revitalizing American industry. So from the perspective of energy demands and challenges, how does that market influence, impact what is going to occur, not just in the short term, as you guys talked about, with the rush that is coming, but in 2027 and beyond? How does that impact the curve? You kind of alluded to it being more of a steady growth frame in some of your slides there, Eric. Is that the general outlook from all of your seats, or are we seeing any curveballs coming at us in the coming decade?
I mean, that's a complex question, Drake. I'll take a stab at it. I think, the hyperscaler growth as well as onshoring of manufacturing, that demand growth that I had on my slide, I think is extremely light. What we're seeing from hyperscalers, not just in Nebraska, but across the country, is extreme growth. And meeting that demand is certainly the challenge of the industry, not only utilities, developers, capital markets, et cetera. It's hard to even know how extensive it's going to be as AI continues to advance. And, the challenges that's going to create is investment in transmission and storage and localized generation to the data center or to the manufacturing facility. There's going to be complex problems, and there's going to need to be complex solutions to address it. And I think the long-term growth of generation, not only from AI and hyperscalers, but also manufacturing, as you pointed out, Drake, is the biggest challenge we have as an industry as a whole, as I see it, tax credits or no tax credits. So.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that if if AI growth is as projected, we just don't even have the ability to build out the grid and the infrastructure. It's impossible. So there's going to come a reckoning at some point. So either it will get constrained, or if it's exposed as a little bit of a bubble, which it may very well be, then even a small fraction of that projected growth will be driving demand for many years to come. And there's growth aside from that, just with the electrification and natural, as Eric says, reshoring of manufacturing and growth of the population, the economy. So we just don't see anything changing as far as the need to continue to grow.
Yeah, and I agree, with a lot of that. There's obviously the load has continued to increase. Obviously what we were projecting several years ago, it's grown a lot more. And so, continuing to, meet the needs and the demands will be a challenge. It's costly, it takes time, the supply chains, bottlenecks there that we continue to move forward. And so it's just hard to say. There's a lot of challenges with it, but we got to continue to meet the load growth and work through all those challenges.
One last point on that, I would just say it's also a great opportunity. I guess this may be somewhat of a controversial opinion, but I think, data center and hyperscaler growth as well as manufacturing growth, I mean, these companies are going around the country looking for places to build these, and whoever has energy and has the ability to advance their project, that's where they locate. And so it's a significant opportunity for Nebraska and economic development and tax revenue and jobs. And so I would just add that point, Greg.
Excellent, appreciate it. We'll open the floor now to questions. If you have one, please raise your hand and we'll get a microphone to you. While the audience is still stewing on maybe some questions here, I do have one more and they'll probably close us out. So appreciate you guys' patience with me this morning asking you these questions. But and I think we've probably touched on this through your presentations, and I'm sure the audience can pull the golden thread that's been spoken on here. So my last question is, many had seen the OBBB as a potential death knell for renewable industry, prior to passing on July 4th and the weeks following. It was one of the classic, we'll know what's in it when it's passed and we were able to read it, which is an unfortunate part of this republic at times. But given the time since the passage and what we've been able to review, what you presented here today, and really reviewing the status of the market and what we need to go over the next 12 to 18 months, what is the general outlook from capacity continuing to rise and needing to meet those needs along the lines of what we just answered, of course, but from each of your seats, what's your outlook? You can be as simple as, we're growing, we're going down, we're positive, we're negative. Just expand upon that general golden thread of where are we today following what people thought was potentially going to be an enormous problem for renewables.
Yeah, I think on that, as we've talked about, there's unprecedented load growth, so we continue to need to meet that. So obviously there's this huge surge of projects being done to meet the tax deadline. There'll probably be a slowdown because you might have, hey, we've built, but you're going to continue to need generation of all types. So renewables, as we've talked about, is probably the quicker to be able to construct and bring online. So whether or not that's a no change because, or we were kind of talked to up, down, no change, that'll continue to grow. We got to meet the extra energy demand. So probably stabilize out would be my perspective.
Yeah, I would agree with Carol. I think at the end of the day, we're just making electricity, just making electrons, and that demand, as Carol said, will continue to increase. And pretty much all forms of energy have some form of subsidization to them. So it's not unique to just wind and solar. So there are going to be changes in the short term and where capital is focused in the short term, but I think long term it's probably going to affect the consumers more than it will ultimately the utilities and the developers. The tax credits that are going away are effectively a pass-through to the consumer at this point anyway. So it's going to increase electricity prices, but given the demand, renewables aren't going anywhere.
I would say the word that comes to my mind when I think about where the industry is going would be maturing. Again, coming from the renewable, coming from the residential side, it was a lot of chaos, and people spoke almost with pride, a badge of honor of the solar coaster, as if riding these waves was a great thing. But I see it getting a lot more even keel, a lot more mature, and as I said, I see a potential culling of the herd in terms of some of the weaker players dropping out and allowing kind of a strengthening, perhaps in the gene pool collectively, of the companies that are best suited to bring the growth and the provision that we need.
Excellent. Thank you for your answers. So we'll wrap up this panel session, or? Okay, we do have a little bit more time. Apologize for that. Does anybody have any questions? We do have one over here. Yes. There should be one coming for you. Right over here.
Eric, in your presentation on the screen, there was a section of the law that talked about no foreign investment, China, Iran, etc., but also talked about critical equipment. Has there been any fleshing out of the definition of what a critical equipment is? I understand a lot of solar panels come from China.
Yeah, so the foreign entity of concern.
I can't hear you.
Yeah, the foreign entity of concern, the fiat clause, that's
Right.
what you're referring
Right.
to. Yeah, so that it's somewhat complex, but if you take a solar project, if a piece of equipment is owned by a corporation in one of those countries or the country itself, then it has to meet a certain threshold of the project. So for 2026, I believe it's 40%. So it's not that you can't buy Chinese panels, but there is significantly more oversight and cost associated with it. And there's additional risk to your tax credits under certain qualifications. So it's not a super simple answer, very complex, and having to understand the full supply chain of who manufactures the product, where it comes from, particularly as it relates to transformers, GSUs, the actual interconnection or the inverters, et cetera. So,
Is that going to inhibit the development of solar particularly?
Could you ask that again? Sorry.
I just said, is that going to end up inhibiting the development of the solar industry?
No, I don't think FIOC is as inhibiting as tariffs are at the moment. For example, a transformer, a GSU out of India, currently costs about half as much as one made in the United States. Still very high quality and would meet utility standards, but 100% tariff on it is negating, and a lead time might be 4 years from a U.S. company, but out of India it would be 18 to 24 months. So, I think tariffs at the moment are probably a larger factor driving increased demand for U.S. products, which is increasing the lead times and overall increasing the cost of development and equipment.
All right, we will close it out here. Thank you to our panel members for presenting today and having this discussion with us. Should you have any further questions for our participants, be sure to stop them in the hallway and say hi as you're going through the conference here, and swing by the ISI Solar booth. We do have a little prize wheel that you can come get some swag on. And then ISI will again be presenting and engaging with you all this afternoon at Breakout Session B in Lancaster 2 regarding the future of PV solar markets in the heartland and beyond. And we hope to see you there. So thank you once again.